So, Marketing POV is a series of sessions where Alon and I dive into different B2B marketing topics and share our perspectives on them. We're excited to have our featured guest, Sara Lattanzio, on this episode. I'll quickly introduce myself and then I'll ask Alon and Sara to introduce themselves as well. I'm Andrew Bolis. I've worked in marketing for 15 years. In my last full-time role, I was a CMO at a Series B company. Currently, I'm a business growth consultant. I build marketing programs that help B2B companies acquire new customers and grow their revenue. I'm based out of the US in Chicago. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and I host these LinkedIn audio events regularly. Alon, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Andrew. So my name is Alon Evan, and I've been a B2B marketer for more than 15 years now and have served as a VP marketing / CMO in my last 3 roles. The same as Andrew, as a fractional CMO and growth expert. In the past 2.5 years, I helped early stage startups and scale-ups build and execute go-to-market strategies to accelerate their revenue growth. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and also obviously co-hosting these events with Andrew. Sara, your turn.
Ooh, okay. I'm Sara. I'm a B2B marketer with about 8 years of experience. And right now I work at a software company as a marketing manager in Switzerland. And I also am an advisor on the side for content strategy focused on B2B. Just so that maybe to put this session a bit into context, I'm not a social media marketer. I'm not an SEO marketer. For me, content strategy is really the overall umbrella that dictates what you're going to do, where you're going to do it, and how you're going to do it.
Great, Sara. Thanks for your short intro. Then I think we can just get right to it. Everyone is talking about content strategy, but in reality, many B2B companies overlook the basics. And instead, they focus on executing fancy and complex tactics. And for this reason, most of them fail. In today's event, Sara will walk us through the step we need to take to create a content strategy that actually works. You want to start, Sara, with the first steps?
Yeah, so I think the problem with the typical B2B company is that most of the times in general marketing comes last, but this is a bigger problem. But also that they don't really understand that nowadays I think content is just the new marketing strategy, because if you don't communicate what you do and if you don't create content, I don't know, it's very hard. So the problem is that usually people start from the execution. So really, okay, let's create, I don't know, a schedule. Let's publish X amount of blog posts. And instead, you should really start from audience research. So really talking to your customers. And this is usually, the first step that I do in all of my content strategy projects. And it's not just like a content strategy exercise or a marketing exercise. I think it's really a step that usually then also is used for product development, customer success, whatever, sales, anything, you know. So the way I tackle this step is I just don't create those HubSpot style persona docs, marketing Mary that has 5 children and in the free time drinks tea, because that's very fun to do. But did somebody ever use that? I don't think so. So I think the way to tackle this is really to balance internal and external research, in the sense, obviously, if you have a bit more time, if you have a bigger budget, then it really makes sense. And especially if the company has never really done customer research, to talk and interview customers directly. But sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it's been done, but the data is scattered. And so then you collect insights from existing customer-facing teams, founders, and try to build kind of those customer frameworks where you collect jobs to be done, motivations, aspirations, kind of job goals that the person has, in the sense, I don't know, if I buy a specific solution, then I will get a promotion because I will change those things in my organizations. And basically, once you have all of these things and you can map them back to how your product makes them achieve those things, then basically you have all the pins that you can then share with the world in your content, because to be honest, that's the content that resonates when people read about stuff that bugs them, stuff that is a problem, or stuff that they can make better, right?
Yeah, I totally agree, sir. I think that many companies skip this step, and at the end of the day, I think it will make or break your content strategy. And when it comes to buyer or customer research, I think it's also the foundation of building your entire go-to-market story, not just the content strategy. And everything stems for your customers. And by actually doing this step, you can avoid wasting money and resources on strategies and content that won't work for your company. So yeah, I think this is a must step that companies tend to overlook in many cases. Andrew, do you have something to add?
Yeah, and Sarah, I like that you have two approaches. I like that you obviously, when you can, like to interview customers and do it that way, but sometimes that's not possible, or maybe some of these interviews were done in the past. And I think you're right. Usually there's a lot of different materials, but it's scattered, all over the place in different sources. Sometimes I find it's in even different people's heads, like maybe the founder, maybe someone else who was there before knows a lot of this stuff. So it's a matter of getting it all organized and put together in a coherent manner. So I love that. So Sarah, what's the second step when it comes to creating a content strategy?
Also, it's not just so that you all understand, those are steps in the sense that obviously when I watch, it's all a flux, and sometimes the things melt, and it's very hard to say this comes first, this comes second, because it varies. But usually this is a bit the flow. So at the same time, you don't only want to look at the customer, because a lot of people tell you, yeah, the customer-centric companies, everything is about the customer, but you are a company, you're there to make a profit. And I'm not saying that you should squeeze the customer into what you offer, right? Because chicken and egg problem, if nobody wants to buy your product, you're a bit in a bad position, let's say. But ultimately, you cannot talk about stuff that you don't sell, because then it's like, what is the point, right? So at the same time, you need also to look what the business goals are, look what the products are, because this will also dictate the content pillars later on. And also here, usually I work with companies that need already to have a strong branding foundation and positioning, because this is a project on its own. So you want to know at this point, what is the mission? What is the vision? What does this company stand for? So that you can then, as part of the content strategy, be like, okay, this is the tone of voice. Those are the key messages, the brand narrative. And for me, this means what are those 3 to 5 things that basically we bring across our content in different ways all the time. I give you just a graspable example with my own content strategy on LinkedIn. I have now about 23,000 followers, so I have experimented quite a bit. But there are always like some key messages that are underlying under every one of my posts. And one is, for example, most B2B companies don't know how to do content strategy, and they don't know what it is. The second one is content strategy is not something tactical. And I don't know, another one is, for example, content strategies don't make any sense, because I think first you need to think you need to think as one, and then you're going to be like, where am I going to distribute? So basically, I'm sure there are more, and probably I didn't tell you, they were not completely accurate, but if you look at all of my posts every day, you will be, so that's one thing she's saying over and over again. And this is the power of branding through content. It's after consuming a few pieces, exactly what this company is about and where they want to go with their messaging. And this needs to be underlying everywhere, in everything that you do, that you communicate. And so in this, apart from setting all these key messages, in this second step, it is important to look at the business goals. So is this a company that is just starting on the market? Is this a company that is just now in a growth phase, so everybody knows them, but they need to boost conversions, whatever? And then you're gonna tailor the content strategy based on the business strategy. For example, if a company comes and says, we want more sales, I'm gonna be like, yeah, but you just launched yesterday. Everybody wants the six pack, but nobody wants to go to the gym. So if you launched yesterday, our goals for the next 6 months to a year are brand awareness based, mostly, right? And so we're gonna tailor our strategy based on these goals. And then we're going to set KPIs. So if our goal is brand awareness, we're going to look at traffic, we're going to look at social mentions, we're going to look at, I don't know, influencers on LinkedIn in your target group, sharing stuff about your product. This is a bit how it works.
Great. I would like to the core messaging, the narrative, vision, mission, and key messages. So I think that's, as I see it, the problem is that there is so much content out there, and it's easy to blend in with the crowd. I even posted about it a few days ago. I think if I remember correctly, the stats, just take a look at LinkedIn, for example. There are more than 9 million posts on LinkedIn per day. So I think this is where unique point of view comes into play. And Sarah mentioned that they remember you for what you stand for. You can build your unique point of view based on your strategic narrative and core messaging, and it's not optional unless you want to be heard like everyone else. And I think this is something that I see a lot of companies are missing, and don't really understand why why their content doesn't resonate. Why their content is not delivering the result they want. So I think developing your POV, point of view based on your company DNA is a really critical component here. Again, unless you want to blend in, but you in order to create the right content for the right audience, you have to say something a bit different than what others are saying.
And Sarah, I love your example about your LinkedIn content. I think you having specific themes that your content always ties to also makes a lot of sense and makes this concept easier to understand because someone can just go through your posts and start seeing those themes. So Sarah, what's the third point or the third step in this process?
Okay, so the third step is the user journey mapping. So basically, this is also a very debated point because everybody's like, oh, the funnel is dead, blah, blah. And the funnel is dead in the sense that it's not like we go in funnels and we're like, oh, now I don't know anything. Oh, now I know a bit more. Oh, now I know a lot. It doesn't work like that. And then I buy. But I think those steps exist and people get to one of those steps at some point. Maybe somebody's very linear, somebody's not linear. And so you need to be prepared for all of those. And you need to understand for each of those steps what the customer does at each step, how do they think, what they want to achieve, and what kind of information do they need at that point. And so the way you do it, the way I do it usually is that, so it's usually have a second workshop with the people that were involved in defining the target audience. And so it's like now we bring those personas, those, I don't care how you call them, it's personas, it's people, it's customers. You bring them to life, and so you bring motion in it. You're like, okay, now that we know what they're struggling with, let's put like some time stamps on it. So I don't know, sales, when a person comes on a sales call, what is their level of awareness? What do they want? And so in that case, if that would be obviously one of the last stages before the sale, would be like, okay, what are the information needs? Do you have other people having, I don't know, referrals or like testimonials, whatever, good, then you can create a sales enablement content for that particular stage. Or maybe when somebody's completely unaware, what would bring them to the next stage? Is it maybe, I don't know, is it somebody following me? So I start promoting maybe a content marketing tool and people trust me because I've been doing this for a while and I have some credibility. So finding out those things is essential to basically push people down the funnel. Sounds very violent, but help them progress towards the purchase, whatever you want to say it. But the thing, I think this is really what it means to give people the right content at the right time in the right channel. And usually this step is also important to stop assuming, especially when a company doesn't have many resources, they want to be everywhere. I never advise a company to don't have a blog. That's, you have to have it, right? But then when you're like, should it be more email or should it be more social media? What is more useful? We only have resources for this. Such an exercise is really important to understand where people are looking for the information at each stage to make a decision.
Yeah, I really, your point about the funnel that is not really resonate with me. And I think that this is where companies get content creation wrong, because they believe or they expect buyers to consume from top of the funnel through middle and bottom of the funnel. But yeah, it's not linear. It's more like a maze, if you can call it this way. And I think that at the end of the day, your goal is quite simple. You need to create content that educate your buyers in whatever stage they are at scale, and address the key questions they have throughout their buyer journey, and then they can move between their awareness changes in their own pace. And I don't think you can really control that, but just be there and let them consume the content ungated, I must say.
Yeah, and your point about companies trying to be everywhere with their content, especially when they have limited resources or limited staff, that resonates a lot with me. I think it ends up being like a spray and pray approach where, hey, we're just going to try to get our content in front of everyone. And I think the content often ends up being not intentional enough or not effective enough. So Sara, what's the fourth step in this process?
Okay, so these are the step that I think is more blurry and is not like now a single step after the user journey mapping, because already during the steps that we mentioned, I usually already understand what are the content pillars, right? And also what are the channels when we map the user journey. But yeah, I think that's a separate, in a way, sphere. And for me, the content pillars are decided basically, we can think about it in like a visual diagram. It's like your offering, your customers' needs and interests, and your interests. So not everything you talk about should be tied to a product, but it should also not be too far away, because otherwise, again, why are you doing it for? But you also need to make sure that all you talk about is interesting for your target group. And I don't know, again, I come back to my own content strategy because it's the closest thing I have. And my content pillars are content strategy, a few personal stories, very few, and then also content creation, maybe some stuff that is slightly more tactical, and maybe some LinkedIn stuff too. So I have, let's say, 3 to 4 pillars, with the biggest one being obviously content strategy. It's not like a random that basically my main pillar is my service, right? And this is how you should think about any other company when they choose their pillars. And then regarding which channels, I see it in the sense, for example, I have clients that are maybe solo founders or whatever, and then they're like, at this moment, I don't have a marketing team, so all I can do is LinkedIn, right? Very different from personal branding and just sharing personal stories. I mean, we're talking still about B2B business, right? So in that case, I don't know, the channel is LinkedIn, and we're gonna double down on LinkedIn because it's all we can do at this moment. In other cases, when maybe they have a bit more resources, a bigger team, then I always advise to start from long form content. So most people, even if on LinkedIn you read about podcasts and and threads and whatever, most people start with a blog. That's just how it is. So it's their long form content. And then from there, basically, you pick a few channels to disseminate this long form content, which usually for B2B is first LinkedIn. You try maybe also to use LinkedIn, the personal content from some of the employees. And then obviously, if they have more budget, if they have more resources, can pick also a few more creative channels that are fun, but that are definitely like more of an experiment. And this is also where you look down at the customer journey and be like, okay, what happens when are we create, what sort of formats are we creating on each channel, and how are we bringing them together in a logical sequence, basically. And at this point, also, you set, in a way, channel level KPIs, general for your content strategy, that are based on your business goals, right? So we said before, brand awareness. So we want to see all those awareness and traffic metrics. But let's say we decide to be active on LinkedIn. Obviously, not every single post, but let's say every month, we're going to go and see, okay, what are the impressions? What is the engagement? Are people commenting? Those are channel level KPIs.
Yeah, I like it. So I think that we also brought it up, but I like to say this sentence: the essence of marketing is narrowing the focus, and the same goes when you execute channel activities, and the same goes for content efforts. And we know that when you overspreading your efforts will lead to poor execution and result, and not to mention that it will be harder for you to maintain consistency. So it's also critical to maintain consistency. Otherwise, if you post once a month, it won't move the needle. And I think it also ties back to talking to your buyers, because you want to find out where they spend time and online and how they want to consume content. And based on that, you should focus no more than one or two platforms, depending on your resources and internal team. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think Alon already touched on it, but I like how you decide on the channels based on the company, that stage they're at, and where their buyers or customers are already spending their time. So Sara, what's step number 5?
Okay, step number 5 is the part where everybody wants to start without doing all the work we mentioned before. And for everybody listening, now you know why you should not start with the editorial plan, because we spoke now for about, 30 minutes. And yeah, the majority of the work has happened up to now, not what will happen after. So now that you have all the strategic level, pinpoints, you can start doing your editorial calendar, which is the tactics, right? So now you're going to be like, now that I know where, when, who, all of the things, and also the formats, let's really say how much can we do of it, right? So can we do weekly? Can we do bi-weekly? And so, I don't know, some people do it in Notion, somebody does it immediately in HubSpot, some people have still Google Sheet calendars. Basically, that's really the schedule that you want to implement. Myself, so a single person posting on LinkedIn, I plan my content weekly, right? So I sit down on Saturday, and then I know exactly what I will post the week after. For bigger teams, I think usually you can plan monthly or quarterly. I don't, and obviously when you have bigger events like product launches or events of any sort, then obviously you have some stuff that you're gonna block months in advance. But I think usually 1 month or a quarter is a good time to also have in mind what you're gonna do, and maybe have those last minute ideas that maybe you didn't think of before, also on how you're going to repurpose it and everything. And here also repurposing is a very important point, because as I said before, I usually start from long form, so that it's a trigger that whenever I have a new blog post coming, I know there will be also, X amount of carousels coming, X amount of text posts, X amount of the CEO posting, a few things about this blog, So a repurposing plan is not something that every time we need to talk about it. It's a trigger in your mind that one piece of content is going to become 70 or 5 or 10 or whatever that is. And it's always the same. And obviously this repurposing plan changes according to how many channels you put in the mix, right? If at some point you decide to throw in a video channel in the mix, then you're going to be like, okay, the new formula to repurpose blog content into video content is, using the intro as a script. And I'm just joking around. But so it's really how are we going to transform this into this? And all of this kind of flow is documented. And then on top of that, also in general, the content production chain is documented in the sense the idea is, I don't know, coming from customer calls. Then, I don't know, we have a brainstorming about how we're going to do this and that. And then, I don't know, the editor works with the marketing expert, the subject matter expert, the designer, like also there, like a proven formula of an assembly chain that needs to work time and time again in the same way. And from experience, as I told you before, I work with clients, I work in-house. And especially at my current company, when I came in, there was nothing like that. And the time literally wasted on this was immense. Like I'm talking about weeks, I'm talking about months, because if people need to start from zero for every piece of content, yeah, like it's impossible. It's really impossible.
We don't have so much time, so just a quick tip about content ideas that cross my mind right now. So I think that's when it comes to also, it's also relevant for repurposing content. So you can take a look at what your ICP posts and comments on social media and community and so on. And even better, you can even use a continuous feedback loop to see what resonates with them and then refine your content strategy, your ideas, and so on. And that's it, I think, because we have another step to cover.
Yeah, and Sarah, I love the idea of having an assembly chain and just keeping everything organized. I think you've already touched on this, but it makes it a lot easier not just to create new content, but to repurpose existing content as you're adding channels. So Sarah, with that, what's step number 6?
Yeah, so step number 6 is just, as I told you before, now you have the KPIs, you have all the implementation plans. So it's also important to monitor those KPIs. So as I told you, I believe channel level metrics should be just to see if you're going in the right direction in this specific channel. Meaning, I don't know, for example, on LinkedIn, that you're creating only text posts and that creating carousels will bring you a lot more reach and engagement. So at some point you need to be like, okay, after maybe 1 month of seeing this constantly, maybe I should do a little pivot before going on with this for the quarter, for the big review. But as I would say, the overall content strategy, I think every quarter you should really sit down, look at all the metrics, talk to all the people involved, and also be like, is there something that we can optimize not only in the output, but also in the input, right? Also in the way we work together. Is there a way to improve the content process, whatever? But a content strategy is a commitment. So I would not, until you really see something wrong, in the sense that there is something to the bug, like really like constant zero engagement, constant really whatever, I would give it at least 6 months before changing anything significant. Also because those realizations don't come one day. They come in accumulated manner with a lot of people giving feedback. And so I would say really basically going back, look at the channels like monthly, look at the overall content metrics quarterly, but don't do any major changes before 6 months.
This is a great point. And I think that if companies are looking at content creation and distribution as a short-term play, they shouldn't do it. And I see a lot of companies asking me also when I advise B2B SaaS companies, they ask me, what is the ROI of one piece of content? And you can't really measure the ROI after one piece of content. You need to focus on measuring the ROI of the channel or the activity, because as Sarah mentioned really well, that it's about accumulation of touch points with your buyers that will eventually drive the ROI from your content. Yeah, take the time, see how it works, measure the right KPIs, don't fall into the vanity metrics trap. And at the end of the day, you can measure it by various ways. For example, using self-reported attribution, or for how you created the demand, or attribution reports and sales calls and whatever the way is. In any case, it's a long-term play and treat it like this.
And Sarah, I like how you also take a holistic approach to making these decisions. So you are looking at metrics and KPIs, but I've heard in there too that you're getting qualitative feedback, maybe from the sales team, maybe from other people or customers if you have access to them. So I like that as well, because I find that metrics are great, but sometimes they just don't really tell the full story.